Today, I'm gonna go over something that I'm asked often is how to get started with real estate investing. We're gonna go over how to pick a property, what kind of funds you need and how you can obtain them. We're gonna go over getting over the fear of being a landlord and getting over the fear of a mortgage. And the last thing we're gonna go over is why just getting started is the best thing that you could do. The first thing we're gonna talk about today is how much money do you need to get started with real estate investing. Once you figure out how much money you need, it's really easy to set your goals and start to plan your finances to get into your first investment property. Now, what I just said is a key distinction: investment property versus property. There's a couple different factors that go into how much money you need, and the first one is, are you going to live in the property? If you're going to live in the property, whether it's a single family home or a multifamily home, you can get in with as low as 3% down. Sometimes 3.5%, it depends on the area and the lending, but 3 to 3.5%, not the conventional 20% that a lot of people spread the myth about. However, if you are investing for a pure investment and you're not gonna live in the property, that's when you're gonna need 20 to 25% depending on the type of house. Single families, you can do 15% down as an investment, which is really nice. That's what I did on one of my properties. But the first target that you should be aiming for is trying to get at least 3% of whatever property you're trying to target and getting an idea of which strategy you want to get into. The 3 strategies I want to talk about today are going to be house hacking, which you can do either buying a single family home and renting out the extra bedrooms, or buying a multifamily home and renting out the extra units, which is a lot more popular and talked about often. The other options are buying a long-term rental. So you buy the property with the intent to just rent it out on a 12-month lease or more. You can do this with a single family or multifamily home, but you're gonna need at least 15% down or more to get into this strategy, which is why I recommend house hacking and getting into a house that you're gonna live in for 3% and trying to make that work first. The last thing you can do is rent as a short-term rental, and depending on your area, if this is allowed, you can rent on Airbnb, VRBO, or other short-term rental and vacation sites to get a higher stream of income typically than you would see on a long-term rental. It's a lot more work to do it this way, but if you automate the right processes, it can be very rewarding relative to doing a long-term rental. Either way, you're still gonna need anywhere between 15 and 25% to buy it as an investment, whether it's short-term or long-term. So let's talk about a couple factors that go into how much money you need up front when buying a property. First off, working with a realtor doesn't cost you anything as a buyer, which is awesome. Another thing to keep in mind are closing costs. Now, you don't just need the 3% down payment, but you also need to bring money to the table for closing costs, which are associated with getting the loan. Now, a really cool thing about real estate is that you can ask for the seller to pay those as part of your deal. So as an example, I bought my first house for $365,000. I didn't have enough money to pay for the closing costs. So what I did was I ended up buying a house for $375,000 instead, but the seller gave me what's called a seller's assist and paid $10,000 of the closing costs, which helped me bring less money to the table, essentially rolling that extra cost more so into the loan. Now, another thing that you can keep in mind when you go to buy a house to live in is that if you plan on doing renovations, there's a loan called a home style renovation loan, and that allows you to have the lender and contractor work together to have the money for the repairs put into the loan up front, and it keeps you from having to do a lot of that work out of your pocket, and it also gives you an expert by your side to help you figure out how much you're really going to be spending with doing the repairs and renovations that you're looking to do. The last thing I want to talk about with down payments is it's very important where the money comes from for your lender. So you can't just ask your mom or dad or your rich uncle, or if you're lucky enough to have any of those that are willing to give you money, you can't just ask them for money. They're gonna wanna see that the money was in your account for the past 2 months, and they're going to be scrutinizing anything in and out of your account to make sure that you're the one who came up with this money. Now, you are allowed to get gift money of up to $10,000 on your first purchase. So when you're looking at 3% down, that $10,000 can go a really long way of help that you can get. So keep in mind that you can obtain gift money, you can have the seller pay for part of the closing costs, and there's a lot of sneaky ways that you can get around bringing more money to the table. The last thing I wanted to talk about in regards to financing, because I know your head is probably already spinning, it's that if you can, you should go with a conventional loan over an FHA loan. FHAs get so much hype and are very popular with first-time buyers for a couple of reasons. The first is the 3.5% down that you can bring to the table, and the second is that it allows you to utilize a 6% seller's assist that we had talked about earlier, where the seller brings some closing costs to the table for you. So those are two reasons, and this is usually the option that people go with if they're extremely cash strapped going into a purchase. Whereas I recommend going with a conventional loan if possible, because you can put 3% down still, which is great. You're still allowed a seller's assist, albeit not as much. 3% on an owner-occupied home is what most lenders are going to allow you to do. So you get less help from the seller on closing costs, so you're going to pay a little bit more out of pocket. But there's two main reasons that I would definitely recommend doing this. The first one is that conventional loans come with better interest rates than FHA loans. And what this means is if you're able to sneak into a conventional loan instead, you're going to get a better rate and have a lower mortgage for the entire life of your loan. So just by bringing an extra couple $1,000s to the closing table, you're gonna save yourself tens of thousands of dollars over the life of the loan. It's a great return. And the other thing to keep in mind with conventional versus FHA is the PMI. For those of you who are just getting started with real estate investing, PMI stands for private mortgage insurance. So that's an extra expense that you pay every month when you don't put a whole lot of money down on the house. Just in case that you default on the loan, you're paying for this to protect your lender. Now, when you go with a conventional loan, the advantage is that PMI will stop being paid once you get to 20% equity in the house. So depending on how far into your loan you hit that market, sometimes it can be anywhere between a couple years to maybe 5, 6, 7 years roughly. After that point, you stop paying this. So that's an extra expense lifted off of your shoulders. Whereas if you go into FHA loan, no matter what you do, you're gonna have to pay that PMI for the entire life of the loan, even after you own 20% of the house. Even if you own 75% of the house, 99% of the house, on that last payment, you're still paying insurance in case you default on that loan. So to recap, conventional is better than FHA because you'll get a better interest rate, you will have PMI drop off the loan, and it only costs a little bit more out of your pocket to bring to the table. And that's why I would recommend conventional over FHA if you get a chance. All right, you've done the hard part, you've saved up some cash, you're ready to get into real estate. How do you pick the right property? Well, there's two ways to get into picking a property. Once you have your strategy, whether you're house hacking or buying an investment to rent out, or whatever the case may be, you can either ask your real estate agent if they know of any good homes for what you're trying to do, because chances are you can find a good real estate agent and one that's interested in investing that'll help you and be able to just send you properties right away that you can look at. They'll know what you're looking for, they've seen this before, and they'll take a lot of the work out of this for you. The other thing you can do is you can play around with a spreadsheet and input all of the expenses that go into real estate into a spreadsheet, crunch some numbers, and make sure that the properties you're looking at are working for you. So you can just do the good old fashioned, go down the line, plug every property you think might work into your spreadsheet, and use that to see what works for you. Now, like I said, the easier way is just ask your real estate agent to send you some properties, and then you just plug them into your spreadsheet, make sure they work, and that will eliminate a lot of your workload. When you're going to make this spreadsheet, what you want to do is try to figure out what kind of cash flow you have at the end of the month. Cash flow is going to be any money left over after all the other expenses that you need to keep in mind are paid for. What expenses do you have to keep in mind? The principal and the interest on the loan. You're going to have to keep in mind the property taxes, your insurance costs, your PMI if you have it. You're going to want to keep a little bit of reserves in case you have any type of vacancies in the rooms or units that you're renting out. Usually you want to account for maybe a month worth of vacancy per year. So if you spread that out over 12 months, whatever that may be, 8.5%. Now, the other couple of things that you want to keep in mind are going to be your repairs and maintenance, and then also what's called CapEx. So that's anything big that could break down or anything that you might have to fix throughout as a one-time big expenditure. So there's a lot of little things that go into that. If you do repairs and CapEx, that may be 15% total, that could be all right. You really have to figure out how averse to risk you are and look up some good modeling numbers for these. But I generally keep these numbers lower in my models, not because I'm super risk averse, but because I focus on new construction and renovated properties. So when you are buying something that's new construction or buying something that's recently renovated, chances are you're going to have a lot less headaches and have a lot less of repairs, maintenance, and CapEx to deal with. So keep in mind, real quick again, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, private mortgage insurance, any type of vacancy, maintenance and repairs, and CapEx. You have to put all of those factors into your spreadsheet. And even after all those things, if you're able to bring in cash flow at the end of the month, then you did a great job picking out a property. One thing I always hear when I talk to people who are interested in getting into real estate is that they're worried about finding tenants or paying their mortgage if they're just buying their first house to live in. Now, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One, it's a lot better to be paying off your mortgage than to be paying rent to anyone else, because that leaves more money in your pocket at the end of the day with the equity that you're earning. You also are now giving yourself a chance to earn appreciation on the home, and on average, homes are going to appreciate maybe 3% or more. Market's been pretty hot lately. And you also get a ton of tax benefits, so it's way better to be buying than renting. The second thing is it's easier than ever to be a landlord. And why I say this is you can find tenants very easily via the internet, whether it's using Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, Zillow, any other types of rental websites, and I can give you a million. You could use an agent to put it on the MLS. A lot of options. It's not hard to find tenants or roommates even on these platforms. Now, another thing to keep in mind when you're starting to be overwhelmed by the idea of a mortgage, and now you're trying to decide 15-year mortgage, 20, 25, 30-year mortgage, just go with a 30-year mortgage. Don't overthink it. It's going to be a lot more manageable for you. You're committing to a lot less per month. And I'm going to make a whole video on 15 versus 30-year mortgages at a later time. But what you need to keep in mind is that your payment's going to be lower, and this will give you more flexibility in the future to finance other things, whether it's a car, another house, whatever. It gives you more flexibility with your debt. And you can also pay it down extra if you wanted to anyway. So let's say a 15-year mortgage would have cost you $1,500 a month and a 30-year mortgage would have cost you $1,000 a month. You can always pay the extra $500 a month if you feel like it, but you have the freedom to not pay it if you don't want to. Another common question is, what is it like landlording? Well, you always hear about all these bad landlords or these bad tenants, these horror stories. The landlord wouldn't do this, the tenant destroyed this. You get to pick who your tenants are as a landlord, so hopefully you're able to screen tenants, and I can help you with that. Also, this is your chance to be the good landlord, so you can be on the other end of this story and finally be someone that tenants start to believe in again. So you have a lot of power there. You're not going to get horror phone calls in the middle of the night about something being broken. Most people are very reasonable. If something's broken, you call someone to have them go fix it in a reasonable amount of time, and you're going to be fine. And the last thing I have to say about becoming a landlord is you don't have to do it to own real estate. You can hire a property manager. So your options are very open. It's a lot easier than a lot of people think, and you just don't want to overthink it. So don't let that deter you from getting into real estate. What I'm going to leave you with today is why you need to just get started. The first reason is it's gonna improve your financial situation to get into owning real estate. Even if you don't pick the absolute best starter property, getting into a property will help you out a lot. The second thing is, the more you sit on the sidelines, the longer you're not winning with real estate. I know a person, an old client of mine, started searching last January. So January of 2019, we were searching, and to date still has not bought a property. He's been waiting for that absolute perfect deal, passing on things. Let's say he was looking for $400 a month cash flow, passing on things that were $399 just because they did not hit his standards, and he would spring for $400. Well, since then, I've purchased a new house, and I've made a pretty good chunk of money since then doing so. And he sat on the sidelines and is now much farther behind relatively than where he was had he just gotten into something. The last thing I want to mention as far as just getting into real estate is there's an educational component to your first property. More so than any of the money you make on your first property, because you are a beginner and you're not going to do every single thing right, is the learning experience that you get with owning a property and getting into it, getting your hands dirty. So please, if you do anything after watching this video, if you've been on the fence about getting into real estate, take the time, save up the money, learn as much as you can, and just get started. Your life will change forever, I promise. Okay, a rant real quick. For all the times that I hear, I hate my job, I just want to own a bunch of properties and I want to be financially free, I roll my eyes every time I hear financial freedom from people who aren't executing. You always talk about hating your boss, wanting to be your own boss, making your own hours, yada, yada, yada. Well, guess what? You don't own anything yet. Stop making excuses, be your own boss, start making ways to win, finding solutions, finding excuses to do things as opposed to making excuses not to buy something yet or not to get into the game yet. Because at the end of the day, you're either in or you're out, and if you're gonna be in, go all in, make it happen, and let me know if there's anything that I can do to help you. Thank you guys for watching my video on how to get started with real estate. If you wanna know anything more about my journey, or if you have any questions about your own journey and getting started, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you. And if you enjoyed this video at all and you found it helpful, please take the time to like it, to subscribe, even throw a comment asking a question. I'm sure a lot of people have the same questions you have, and I'd be happy to answer it there. Thanks again, and see you next time on Financial Freedom.